We are continuing our Kids in Crisis coverage with an in-depth look at the scope of the mental health crisis for Minnesota's young people and a look at solutions.
In the most recent Minnesota student survey, 29% of school-age kids reported struggles with mental health, greater than at any other time since that survey started in 1989.
One of the toughest parts of this challenge is the lack of mental health care providers. The shortage is severe in most of the country, including all across Minnesota. Experts say that Hennepin County needs 40 more therapists to meet the mental health need here. Most areas are worse off. 76% of Minnesota's counties have no child and adolescent psychiatrists, and the problem is the worst in rural areas. More than 86% of mental health clinicians are in urban areas, but only 1.5% of clinicians are in isolated rural areas.
There is also a severe shortage for patients seeking culturally sensitive care. 88% of Minnesota's clinicians are white. Fewer than 3% of clinicians are black, and 1.4% are Hispanic. 0.3% are Native. These shortages sometimes mean kids and teens end up in hospital emergency rooms. CBS investigative correspondent Stephen Stock and his team visited the front lines. You should know this story includes frank conversations about the mental health crisis that for some might be difficult to hear.
Michaela shares her story.
You're just kind of left alone.
Not because of where she is at age 20.
It kind of feels hopeless.
But because of where she was just a couple of years ago.
For me, I would be crying out for help.
Inside a hospital emergency room in Colorado for the 8th time, suffering a mental health crisis.
It wouldn't happen until I came to a point where it was too late.
Michaela ended up in the ERs because she was suicidal or in acute crisis. The first time when she was 12. She now considers herself a survivor.
It definitely made me stronger.
I was in the ER for 19 days.
Daniel considers himself a survivor too.
The ER is inhumane and not the right place to go for mental health. All right, let me show you the oldest one.
Daniel shared his story after a mental health crisis landed him in a Boston ER when he was 17. He's been in the ER 3 different times in the last year alone.
They don't get what they need. They are still trying to find the help they need, and it's so damn difficult.
So many stories we heard, different journeys, one problem. Young people suffering a mental health crisis ending up in the last place doctors think they should.
This is such a big problem around the country. This is the front lines now on treating mental health among juveniles, is the emergency department.
It is not an ideal place to be.
In January, we spent a day with Dr. Kevin Carney, head of the ER at Children's Hospital Colorado.
This morning when I came in, we had 5 patients who came in overnight into the emergency department for mental health reason.
Children's Hospital Colorado says last year system-wide, they saw an average of 554 children every month in their ER with mental health issues. How's there to keep them safe, but where the children got little to no treatment?
The PsychD, hoping I could check bed status for...
Staff members spend hours every day calling around Colorado.
No beds today.
Thank you.
Looking for places where kids can get treatment.
Maybe across the whole system 4 or 5 beds in the whole state today.
Okay, thank you.
And I have 8 waiting for beds already.
Okay, no beds today at
And I
all.
have 4 more to be seen today, and it's only noon.
Which is why so many children wait hours, days, even weeks inside the ER.
We've seen a significant rise.
We found a similar crisis at Cook Children's Hospital in Fort Worth, Texas.
But we're seeing even younger and younger kids, 8 and 9-year-olds, that are expressing that they want to hurt themselves, that they want to die.
Over the last 2 years, they've seen an average of 330 kids a month with mental health issues in their ER.
So we're in one of our psych safe rooms.
Kids in Fort Worth and across the country wait in ER rooms like this one, stripped down for their protection.
They prevent you from being able to harm yourself. We've had length of stays over 36 hours in this room.
You feel terrible for the families when they're trapped here for hours, days on end trying to find placement.
More than 60% of youth with major depression don't receive any mental health treatment. Our investigation found 41 states with a severe shortage of child psychiatrists.
We got to go to where folks are.
The person in charge of this, Health and Human Services Secretary Javier Becerra, We met with him in Dallas during a panel with young black men.
I was actually suicidal my senior year of high school because when people don't feel safe, people don't talk, people don't speak, people don't say anything, and they just deal with it. That's why you have people committing suicide. That's why you have people turning to drugs and alcohol, because they don't know where else to go.
They're crying out.
It starts with the youth.
Shame on us that we haven't prepared.
Is that acceptable that we've got young people in ERs all over with mental health issues all over this country?
No, it's not acceptable. It's not care. It's housing them.
Why hasn't the federal government done more until now?
It's pretty simple. Money.
We checked, and the Biden administration has dedicated more money to juvenile mental health than previous administrations. $1 billion over the next 5 years to pay for things like medical school to increase the number of mental health specialists, and a goal of doubling counselors in schools. But critics say those one-time grants are short-term answers. Does Congress need to step up and treat this as a continuing problem that they need to fund better?
Absolutely. And that's why President Biden called this part of his unity agenda. This is something where red or blue, Republican or Democrat, we all know someone who needs help.
Our kids need us to be there for them.
You don't always see this kind of emotion from a school superintendent. But mental health is such a priority for Chris Smith and his Denver area community that they voted for a $15 million bond to build a combination mental health treatment center and school due to open this fall. Intensive care and classrooms where kids can slowly transition back to traditional school.
This is personal for you. Why?
Because I've been impacted by suicide, and I've been impacted by mental health. And so we need to do whatever we can to engage and push in and make sure that our kids feel loved, valued, and invested in.
Smith admits not every school district can pay for a solution this big, but for him, it's an investment they can't afford not to make.
Our kids need to know who they are, because if they walk into our schools and they feel loved, they feel invested in, and they feel valued, they won't hurt themselves and they won't hurt others.
The idea of a child or teen hurting themselves or others can be scary. One question we are asking as we explore mental health: how do you know if you're okay?
I talked with a local clinical social worker to learn the signs.
This sounds like a simple question. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. And I know I'm a stranger in a way, but are you doing okay?
I am. Yeah, today I am.
Looking inward might seem easy.
Have you ever just asked yourself, am I doing okay, or thought about it that way?
Yeah, a lot.
But what you find might not be.
To really state that we're not okay, for some people it's a form of losing control.
Sienna Isaacs is a licensed independent clinical social worker. What are some of the warning signs that would give that indication I'm not okay?
You have a baseline at which you would operate daily and you go about your everyday activities and you're leading a healthy lifestyle. But when things start to change, that's when we question ourselves, are we okay?
If you start losing interest in some of your hobbies and activities.
Your sleep pattern changes by either getting too much or not enough. You take more risks, like an increase in substance abuse.
You don't go out like you used to. You don't have the energy for work. You're isolating, you're not attending social functioning.
You know, when you feel like you've had enough stress and you can't quite take one more thing. Mm-hmm. I've had some days like that recently.
How do you know if it transitions from just a tough patch to you're not actually okay?
It's over a period of time. It's not a 1 day or a 2 day thing.
How do you snap out of those times?
So actually I do yoga. I just do a lot of yoga, which is fantastic for my back, but also helps center yourself.
Rebecca prefers daily walks.
I just feel more energy. I feel more cheerful. I see people and I see dogs. There's certain dogs in the neighborhood that know me.
Even if we move and leave the house, we come in contact with other people, and exercise has a positive impact on our brain health.
Exercising can fight off depression by releasing endorphins in the brain while also taking your mind off what's stressing you. Other tips for feeling better include eating a healthy diet, relaxation techniques like a bath, exposure to sunlight, and socializing. However, if nothing seems to be working,
then it's time to contact a professional.
Ideally, children can talk to a therapist before they are in an emergency situation.
Mental health therapist Ryan Mellick spoke to WCCO about how to know when to get help and shared some helpful tools to get through tricky conversations.
Okay, so look, let's jump right into it. A question that we've been hearing a lot. What are some of the signs you would say that your child could actually benefit from therapy?
I think right off the bat, the biggest sign is that they're asking to talk to someone else. They might be isolating from friends or family, starting to struggle in school, either socially or academically. And then for some of the younger kids, it can be a lack of social skills or just uncertainty about social interactions and then behavior dysregulation.
Is that what you're seeing in some of your youngest patients, some of those things that are maybe experiencing anxiety and depression?
Yeah, it's definitely showing up in forms of isolating, withdrawing from school. They're showing just overall lack of motivation and interest in things they used to enjoy. And then on some of the more extreme cases, it can be some of the suicidal thoughts, engaging in some self-harm behaviors.
I know that you've worked in both a clinic and a school space. Can you walk us through some of the differences? Because they can be very different.
They can be very different. I think the biggest difference is just the space and the setting. So in the school setting with the school-based therapist or your school counselor, you are surrounded by sometimes what the problem is. So it can be really tricky and difficult to want to address some of those concerns, right? Like no one wants to talk about their difficult friendships when
they're right there.
They're at school with their friends.
Yeah.
And so I think the bigger piece too is just the space and then the amount of time. Usually in the outpatient setting, we're working more for 50 minutes. And in the school-based setting, it can be anywhere from like 20 to 30, maybe longer. Those are really the two big pieces.
So would you say that an outpatient place would be better than a school in addressing some of those issues?
It depends on the issue and the concern. If they're pretty significant, I do think that an outpatient setting would be healthier and maybe more effective because they can be outside of that setting and have a little more time, and then they're not thrust right back into their school day.
So I'm thinking, like, for anyone who has decided to join therapy or decided to give it a shot, that could be tough. I mean, just making that first step, that can be a daunting thing. What are some ways that you would say would be a good idea or good way to prepare your child and then also prepare yourself for a session?
Yeah, so to prepare your child, the simplest and easiest way is to talk to them about what therapy is. We are different than your typical doctor. We don't do shots. We don't do weights, measurements. We are very much just focused on talking and teaching you about how to understand your thoughts, feelings, and emotions. Showing them a picture of your therapist that you can find online, print it off, let them see it to get comfortable with the face that they're going to see. And then for the adults or the parent, I think the biggest way to prepare yourself is check your insurance coverage. Most people don't know that mental health coverage can be wildly different than their medical coverage, and that can be pretty shocking.
Yeah, it certainly can be. If you're looking through your options, you're like, wait a second, this isn't covered, and you thought it was covered. So that's definitely good advice. So okay, so you've decided to start therapy. Walk us through, if you can, what actually happens in a therapy session.
The first session is all about information gathering. As the therapist, I want to know as much as I can about what your child is experiencing or what you as the parent are experiencing so that I can help you more. So we go through a lot of history, get to know each other, and then going forward, we come up with a plan of how do we want to tackle these symptoms. If it's anxiety, are we going to focus on social skills, social interactions? Maybe it's test performance, perfectionist tendencies, and really just coming together as a collective to best support the kid. So sometimes we do some therapeutic play, crafts. You know, not every kid is capable of talking for 50 minutes, so we have to sprinkle in some fun here and there.
Okay, so really quick, because we are starting to run out of time, how do you reinforce then that at home? After you've had the therapy session, trying to reinforce that at home?
That's a really tricky one, and that is put heavily on the parents, and I think we see that on the back end if progress is being made in therapy.
Okay. One final question. Do you recommend therapy for parents whose kids are in therapy?
Yes, absolutely. If you are being upset or triggered, as the big word is right now, by your child's behavior, there's something else going on, and you should definitely seek out therapy for yourself.
Ryan, thank you so much for taking a couple minutes to join us. I wish we had more time because it feels like we are just now just barely scratching the surface as far as what you can expect when it comes to therapy. But again, we appreciate your insight and your time.
In addition to talking to your child's school, the State Department of Health advised that parents can also look into telehealth to find therapists if you can't find someone in your area.
We asked state health officials how they are working to get more mental health resources. They told us their strategy includes programs to help new graduates get licenses, supporting rural clinicians with loan forgiveness grants, supporting telehealth, expanding community-led care, and more. They also shared resources which we have included on WCCO.com/mental health. Another stressor for many teenagers is climate change. Research shows most youth are extremely worried about it.
National environmental correspondent David Schechter connects with a professor whose research shows that there is something they can do about those feelings.
In Chelsea, Massachusetts, just outside Boston, there's so much jet fuel, road salt, and heating oil stored on the river. It's hard for some residents to even get close to the water. When you're young, that's the kind of thing you notice.
You wouldn't see that in a white neighborhood. You wouldn't see any industries, any smoke, any pollution.
Because a lot of the teenagers in Chelsea lived in Chelsea since they were children.
These high school students are environmental activists at a nonprofit called Green Roots.
I feel like adding more green space would help people in Chelsea go out more.
They work alongside adults advocating for environmental justice in their hometown.
I hope that they would understand and get a chance to experience that people will take them seriously when they speak to concerns and they speak to the problems that they are facing.
With a group like this, so focused on environmental problems in their neighborhood, it should come as no surprise that they're also worried about climate change.
We impact not just ourselves, but the whole world.
They know that the world is going to get to be a harder, darker, scarier place, and imagining themselves in that world feels really scary for them.
Dr. Sarah Schwartz is a professor of psychology at Suffolk University. She's been researching a phenomenon called climate change anxiety.
Climate change anxiety, I think, is an appropriate and normal response to what is going on our Earth, on our globe. I think we need to recognize it as something that a lot of people are experiencing.
This study, published last year, collected attitudes about climate change from 10,000 young people from around the world. Across all countries, 59% of youth said that they were very or extremely worried about climate change. And when it comes to how they're feeling, 62% reported anxious, 67% said sad, and 67% said afraid. The survey asked young people to respond to statements like this.
The future is frightening, yes or no?
Yes, the future is frightening because, we see how all this has happened in such a short amount of time. And if we look into the very future without any change, it's not looking that good for us, no.
People have failed to take care of the planet.
Yes, the trash island, the oceans, it's not really a clean place.
I am hesitant to have children, yes or no?
Yes. I don't want them catching asthma or having to worry so much about their health.
Yes, due to the fact that it just brings anxiety.
Dr. Schwartz says activism may be an effective way for kids to deal with those feelings.
So you can flip that one over.
Research found engaging in activism, like these students building a pop-up park in their neighborhood, may help prevent symptoms of depression.
Our research does suggest that climate activism may serve as some sort of buffer or protective effect for climate change anxiety.
And being part of that feels like I'm part of the solution.
Yeah, I'm part of the solution, and there's a whole lot of people with me doing this, so I'm not alone with my worries.
That feels right to these young activists.
And I think that if there's more people like this working towards a better future, I feel like there can be a change.
It helps me deal with it like I'm not the only one.
There are moments where you're just wow, nothing's ever gonna change, but then there's also that small feeling that there's still hope, that people will change, that people will come together to help save humanity.
Hope. It's not a strategy for tackling the challenges of climate change, but for a younger generation, it may be the best place to start. I'm David Schechter, CBS News.
Many factors can impact a teen's mental health. Sometimes that's inadvertently something we hope will be good for them. Young athletes have a lot on the line. They have to do well in school and do well in their sport to compete for scholarships, and that can amount to a lot of pressure. Royce Jones spoke to one soccer coach who says staying mentally healthy is the goal, win or lose.
For this elite group of girls at the B-Link Soccer Club in Cannonsburg, ball is life. High school seniors Stephanie Cornelius and Haley Longwell have decided to further their soccer careers and are both celebrating commitments to Division I universities, which is something most of the athletes that come through this league do or aspire to do. But the success these girls have achieved has not come without discipline and sacrifice.
I have team practices like 3 times a week approximately, and then on the other days, like, I'm normally working out on my own, going to the field with myself.
You have high school practice, and when you don't have practice and you have games, so there's never really a day off.
And underneath the demanding schedule, intense physical strain, and tough competition are the emotional pressures of being the perfect athlete and scholar.
You're competing on your team, but you're also like comparing yourself in the classroom.
I feel like a lot of athletes especially, they always feel that pressure of, you can't really mess up or let people see that you're sometimes maybe like not doing okay.
Something their head coach, Libby Mascaro, is working to change. She volunteers with the National Alliance on Mental Illness and knows the impact that stress of this magnitude can have on kids.
The statistics for children aged 10 to 24, the number 2 cause of death is suicide.
In fact, in 2022, 5 NCAA athletes died by suicide within a 2-month time frame. It created concern in college sports. Mascaro says that she's working with her high school athletes to create a culture of love by putting less emphasis on performance and more on the person.
They walk in and it's not just, hey coach, it's like they're beelining to get them, for you to ask them a question about their life that's not soccer. How was your brother's piano recital, or how was your science test yesterday, or what's going on, something outside of soccer?
Coach Mascaro reminds parents when it comes to their young athletes, they need to act as a goalie against some of the pressures that come their way.
Maybe they lost, and they get in the car, and maybe the child is quiet. The last thing the parent should be doing is saying, I can't believe you didn't do XYZ, or why didn't you do this? Just turn around and say, hey, I love watching you play. And then if they are upset, maybe they talk about it.
Keeping these girls confident off the field so they can be competitive on it. I'm Royce Jones, KDKA News.
Feeling stressed or anxious? There's an app for that.
Literally thousands of apps can be downloaded to help. I talked to an expert to learn about the benefits and drawbacks of mental health apps.
Have you heard of mental health apps?
I have, yes.
Headspace, Calm, yeah, I have Headspace on my phone.
Type in mental health in your phone's app store and there's no shortage of options.
What made you want to download Headspace?
Just wanted to find ways to, meditate, relax, de-stress.
The evidences are pretty effective.
Dr. Tom Insel is the former director of the National Institute of Mental Health.
What would you consider their best uses?
Best use is really to help people learn to get control of their emotions, to help them with mindfulness or with meditation.
Having time to just process your life and breathe is really, really beneficial.
And it's all at your fingertips whenever you need it. Some apps like eMoods and iBreathe are free. Others, like the popular Headspace and Calm, have free trials but ultimately require a subscription.
What benefits have you felt?
They can be a great way to, again, de-stress and kind of de-elevate where you are personally in that moment in time, especially things like going to bed at night.
Dr. Insel compared it to exercising, but instead of your body, the apps teach you workouts and routines for your mind.
Where might these apps come up short?
Well, not all of them have really built in the scientific evidence to show that they do what they say they do.
He added that the apps are good for treating your overall mental health, but not serious mental illness. For that, seek a professional.
But ultimately, if you have deeper mental health issues like myself, going to see, your primary care physician, going to see a psychologist, or even taking medication can help with some of those deeper issues.
The apps, however, are a low barrier start, giving people living in a digital world access to help they might not have sought.
Still, much to learn about how to optimize all of this, but it's certainly a step in the right direction.
If you or someone you know is in crisis, get help from the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by calling or texting 988.
And if you missed our streaming documentary, Connecting the Dots, you can watch it again tomorrow at 3 p.m. or Saturday at 4 p.m. And for resources and more stories about mental health solutions, go to WCCO.com/mental health. Thank you for joining us.